skies, I found my light. With Jesus by my side, I conquer every fight. Walking in faith, I won't be afraid. His love surrounds me, my fears will fade. Hope is my anchor, love is my guide. With Jesus I'll overcome, I'll never hide. A warrior of strength, in His name I rise. In a world of chaos, His love never dies.
She's an award-winning author, speaker, owner of GodlyGranny.com, and podcast host, sharing the truth with you. This is The Michelle Moore Show.
Hi, everyone. So glad that you're with us today. Happy Tuesday. Boy, have we got quite the show for you. Have you heard of Gail Seiler? Holy moly. So she had a husband that had to go to the hospital and rescue her. She was naked, starved, and drugged. They were, thinking that she wasn't going to leave the hospital. And thank goodness she had somebody to stand up and really stand in the gap for her and be her hero. And it sounds like it was her husband. So we're going to get the details today to her story. We got Laura Bartlett here. She's been here before. She's with the IDonotConsentForm.com. She in her own right is a hero. And of course, she's got Dr. Richard Bartlett as a brother who he is doing quite the heroic things as well. And has been. He's been one that has been one of those doctors that has been a truth teller. And so praise God for those that do that. First, I want to just remind you today's Tuesday. So tomorrow and Thursday, we're running documentaries, educational videos. Tomorrow, producer Ron has slated, this is going to be so good, y'all. Okay. So it's called In the Shadow of Flexner. Are you familiar with the Flexner Report? So, okay, here we go. He's got a little thing here, descriptive paragraph about it. It says the documentary claims a century-old shift prioritized drugs and surgery, deliberately sidelining alternative approaches like homeopathy, herbalism, and of course, osteopathy. Tinctures much? Just saying. They try to demonize these things, hide them. And these, like I said to my son today, these kinds of things are God's medicine. And so it serves as a poignant critique of modern healthcare priorities in the face of rising chronic illnesses and escalating costs, while establishing the point that the Flexner Report was used by orthodox physicians and profit-driven magnates like Carnegie and Rockefeller to marginalize nature-aligned treatments. They try to demonize it, hide the truth. And then Thursday, the 5G Trojan horse. This documentary exposes the truth behind the global race to 5G, the health, privacy, and local power concerns, and the corruption between the big wireless industry and the U.S. government. Both of these documentaries are going to be must-see. Producer Ron was telling me about In the Shadow of Flexner, which is tomorrow's documentary, and it's a good one. He said it's absolutely jaw-dropping, and it covers so many details. He said he couldn't hardly believe what he was watching. So I'm so excited. Producer Ron has been at it again and found a couple of really great educational documentaries for you. We love our producer Ron. Thank you so much, Producer Ron, for all your hard work, especially with helping me educate you and making sure you have the information to make it just informed decisions. And that's going to include today. You don't want to be going to the hospital. You don't want to be going to doctor's appointments or having any kind of procedures without having the I do not consent form. And we're going to be talking with Laura Bartlett about that. But first, let's listen to Gail Seiler's story. Let's go on ahead and bring her in, Producer Ron. And hi, Gail. How are you doing, honey?
Hello.
Okay, so you got quite the testimony.
I do.
And it's amazing. So I was reading what Laura Bartlett said husband rescued his naked, starved, and drugged wife. Okay, so you ended up in the hospital. What happened? Did you have COVID, whatever?
Yeah, so, we had been involved in the medical freedom movement, so we knew what the hospitals were about. And, we fought the mandates and all of that. And then during the declared winter of death for the unvaccinated, I did catch what I can only describe as, I I mean, we believe the whole thing was a bioweapon. My husband was a he was a bioweapons officer in the military, and he recognized it for what it was in the beginning. But I did get sick. I got sick after Thanksgiving, and it hit me very hard. It hit me like no virus would ever hit you. Uh, it attacked my lungs and all sorts of things. And my husband, being a retired nurse, was monitoring me, and at, we tried to get the monoclonal antibodies. I could not get them. I did not qualify for them, and the supply was short because it had been taken over by the federal government. I live in Texas, and we had a abundance of it. And then September of 2021, it, they took control of the supply, so I couldn't get it. I couldn't get ivermectin filled anywhere. I couldn't get the protocols that we needed filled, and so it had to be mailed to me. And during that time, on December 3rd of 2021, I my oxygen dropped to 77, and my husband said, "We have to do something. We need to get oxygen. We need to get oxygen for you." And so we'd been involved in local politics, and we knew that Colonel Allen West and his wife had went to Medical City Plano, and he had been given the frontline doctor protocol. He had been given budesonide, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin. And so we said, okay, it's 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes from our house. We'll go there. And he printed out the protocol and did all of the things that he needed to do, that he recognized as a nurse would show them, hey, this is critical to get her in. He wrote really big what my pulse ox was. He monitored me in the waiting room. It still took a very long time for me to get back there, but once we did get back there, um, he asked them and made sure that they would do that protocol, and they said they would. They said they would. He left a copy with me. Then they made him leave because it was protocol that since I had COVID, um, he couldn't be in there. But he felt at the time, since they were going to do that protocol, the ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and budesonide, that I would be okay. That this would be a hospital that I would be okay in. It didn't turn out to be that way. Once I got up to the ICU and met the hospitalist, and it took me 36 hours to get up to the ICU because they did not open an ICU unit. They needed 5 or more patients to make it worth the money to open it. And so 36 hours later, they brought me up to the ICU. And the first thing I noticed was, they pulled your bed forward so I could see in the window of the room next to me. And there was a woman in the room crying over somebody in the bed, and that person was on a vent. And then they backed me up into my room, and I was very clear: no vent, no remdesivir, no, nothing but the protocol. And then I met Dr. Quach, who was the hospitalist. He came in a few hours after I got in the ICU, and he asked me, one of the first questions he asked me was, "Are you vaccinated?" And I said, "No." I try to be polite. I didn't want to say, "No, I'm not taking that,
Yeah.
name altering
Yeah.
therapy shot." So I tried to be polite. I was like, "No, it's fairly new. I work from home. I don't really engage with a lot of people, so I didn't take it." And he patted me on the hand. He hadn't even examined me. Patted me on the hand, and he said, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Seiler, you're going to die." And I remembered from Richard Bartlett's seminars that we had attended. He said, you can fire your doctor." So I was like, "You're fired, doc. I need somebody who knows what they're doing, right? Not I'm going to die, because I didn't come here to die."
That's
And so,
right.
and I called my husband. I recognized that they were gaslighting me. So I called my husband, and, I had this mask on and all this air blowing in my face. And I said to him, I said, "This crazy doctor said I'm going to die." And he was like, "What are you talking about? You just got you're not going to die from a novel virus." And he was like, "Yes, unless she takes remdesivir and goes on a ventilator, she's going to die. And even then she'll probably die. And my I told them at that time, I said, because you never know, like, as strong as you are, you don't know what's going to happen if they tell you you're going to die every 10 minutes. So I told them I won't consent to anything myself. You have to call my husband, because I knew he was going to be strong, right? I won't consent to anything.
That's a good
No
point.
one, yeah, because you could become very weak, or they could have, drugged me and said, I was thinking about all. He did me a favor by saying he was going to kill me up front because I was alert. I was like,
Mhm.
it woke me up like a shot, right? So I was like, um, and my husband was starting to get sick too, so he was trying to recover at home, and that kind of set off the path of, my daughter and my husband were advocating for me, but they were being shut down a lot. So there were, there were a lot of things that they were doing. They were very they were very cruel, to be quite honest, with about the fact that I was unvaccinated. I mean, the nurses themselves were there. There were a few good ones, but there were some very there was a lot of, brutal behavior. So they wouldn't give me water. I didn't get water for 7 days. 7 days. That Out of all of the things that they did to me while I was in that room for 12 days, the water, the not having water was probably the most excruciating thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Because your
Did
body,
you ask for water and they just
no,
refused to give it to you?
like, I begged for water, and 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 they didn't give me any nutrition for 12 days. But you can survive that, right? Like, you can survive, um, you know, and and I was overweight, so I could have lasted a long time. Just, what I mean? But the water is something you cannot, like, it starts to affect your kidneys. It starts to affect how it's painful. You cramp, you get a lot of, right, like, effects. And so I couldn't get out of bed, and I was very weak, and I was getting weaker, and they were making me sicker. And my husband and my daughter were looking at my records, um, from the electronic records, and my husband recognized something I would not have known, and that is that they were killing me with oxygen, that they were upping the oxygen, and that would lead me to a vent. And he understood that that would lead me to a vent, and he started to intervene. And my daughter, very early on, she was so desperate within the first couple days that somebody snuck her into the Clay Clark event that was in town and brought her back to meet some of the doctors. And Dr. Bartlett, when I told Dr. Quach, I said, Dr. Bartlett recommends budesonide. If you don't want to give me ivermectin, it's not like I'm asking for eye of newt, but if you don't want to give it to me, what about budesonide? And and my husband had said to him, we're going to find a way to get Dr. Bartlett to help us. And then, and he said to us, he said, Dr. Bartlett will never help you because he only helps the easy cases. You're too far gone. And 10 minutes after he stormed out of the room, like, I was like, I have no hope, like I really lost hope. But this is how God works, right? So, like, 10 minutes after he walked out, after saying that, my daughter sends me this picture to my phone, and it's her and Dr. Bartlett. She's, like, literally talking to him. And I was like, wow, how did she? So I was like, you're wrong, Dr. Quach. He's going to help us, right? And help us he did. We pushed for that budesonide, and they kept denying it. And my husband would say, will it hurt her? I don't care if you think it'll work. Will it hurt her? And he said, no, it won't hurt her, but they're never going to approve it. And so finally he got a pulmonologist to write the order for budesonide. And sure enough,
Who did?
my
Doctor.
husband
Okay. Okay.
did everything Dr. Bartlett told him to do. And he finally got the pulmonologist to write the order. And it went to the pharmacy, and administration kicked it back, and the pharmacist kicked it back. And never in my husband's career had he seen
Mhm.
where pharmacists and administrators could override a doctor's order, right? But it did. And so there came the fight. It was a many day fight. So I went in on the 3rd. We started pushing for budesonide on the 4th and the 5th. I finally got the first dose, I think on the 7th. It was on the 7th. And they wouldn't do it every 4 hours. They wouldn't do it every 6 hours. It was every 10 hours. So I got 2 doses. And the next day, and I'm still not getting any water, and I'm still, not getting any vitamins. They told my daughter there was a national shortage of vitamin C, and they only saved it for the most critical patients. And she was like, "You told my mom she's going to die. That sounds pretty critical." But
Right.
I'll bring her vitamin C that she has at home, and they wouldn't let her do it. But when I got the 2 doses of budesonide, he came in and he said, "I've never seen this before. You're starting to improve." And I thought, well, maybe he's seeing the light. I said, well, imagine if you gave it to me every 4 hours, like Dr. Bartlett said to give it to me. And I don't know, throw in some ivermectin. You never know what will happen, right? Like it could work. And he said no. And then they started to replace the budesonide with albuterol treatments. And we had to go back to fighting for budesonide. And it was at that moment, my husband was like, oh my gosh, they are going to kill you, because they're intentionally, they saw something working and they are deciding specifically to do something that won't work, to take away what's working and give you something that won't work. And they were very abusive. I was naked. They wouldn't give you covers, because you know how they would examine you? They would look in the window. Nobody examined me. Nobody listens to my lungs. They did an x-ray a day. And then it was just like, it was this horrible, no mouth care, no bathing, no sheet changing, nothing. And then they started to bring in, and let me back up a little bit. We were there a few days or a couple days, and my husband, I asked them when I told Dr. Quatch, because he came back every day. I fired him every day for 12 days. He kept coming back. And I said to him, I said, you gave me a terminal diagnosis. So I want the right to try. I want the right to try budesonide, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. I said, and I have a right to have my priest come in and give me last rites. I have the right to have my priest come in. And he said, he wouldn't allow it unless I took remdesivir. He said, if you take remdesivir, I'll let your priest come in. And so I did. I took 1 round of remdesivir. My priest came in the next morning, and he was like, don't take any more remdesivir, right? Because he knew what was up. And so I got my sacraments, and when he left, I said, I don't want remdesivir anymore. And the doctor was mad. But like I told him, I should not have had to make that decision. And so I shouldn't have had to make that deal. It should have just been allowed. But my family, they would try to get in. My husband kept trying to come up, and they would block him. Security would block him. We got a lawyer. I couldn't just, a lot of people are like, why didn't you just get up? Because I couldn't walk by this time. By the time they have you on such high, like they had me on 60 liters of oxygen. I didn't know that was killing me, but I certainly couldn't get up and walk out. And you atrophy very quickly being in. This is something I didn't realize, is when you are in a bed for days, no food, no water, you lose your ability to stand and to do things. And so, I saw
you get weak quick. It doesn't take long. It takes just a day or two. And then on top of that, with you not getting any fluids, it's people may not realize how quickly, unless you're 10, the older we are, it can go downhill extremely fast.
Right. Especially with the oxygen. And then, and that's why they try to put people on vents so quick. Because what are you going to do? You're not going to go and save your loved one and take them home when they're on a vent. You can't. And so he kept trying to push my husband, and my husband, held pretty strong. And he finally one day said to my husband, "What do you want me to do when she codes?" And he said, "I want you to resuscitate her." He said, "Well, then I have to vent her." And he said, "No, you don't. You can bag her. You can revive her. And you can use an ampio bag. And I'll come down and examine her and tell you what to do next. But I'm not going to give you blanket permission to vent my wife, because you will vent her. You will find a reason to vent her." And so he kept going back and forth. And I'm a full code. And my daughter would call me and she'd say, "Mom, they have you listed as a DNR in your record, a do not resuscitate." And I would tell the staff, "I'm not a DNR. I'm a full code." And they would say, "No, you're not. You're a DNR. It says in your chart you're a DNR." And I'm like, "I'm telling you, I'm not a DNR." We even had a lawyer go to the administration to try to get that changed, and they would not change it. So that is a really scary thing, to be in a hospital and then to tell them that you're a full code, and for them to say, "No, you're not. Like, we're going to let you die if something happens." And so,
Well, what did they say about that? Like, who determined that you were a DNR? And
the
why
doctor,
couldn't the attorney get that changed?
yeah, the doctors, apparently there's this thing where the ethics board can just make you, they can decide whether you're worth living or not. Like it's,
Oh, okay.
and I didn't know this at the time, but I have seen this in many records where the ethics board just makes that decision.
Are you
And
familiar with what's going on down in Florida, where if you're 25, not married, you know
yes,
about all that?
the
Where,
free
yeah,
will
so
bill.
yeah,
Yeah. And we
whole
have our
nother
own fight we have our own fight in Texas. We used to have the 10-day rule, where if you're in a coma for 10 days, they can just starve you to death and pull you off everything. Now it's 20 days, but we're trying to make it so that, God decides.
thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And so, yeah, so that
Well,
was
what
that
was
was
the straw? What was the straw that broke the camel's back, to where your husband shows
yeah.
up, and how does he get past the guard? What
Well,
happens?
he came the night before, or the day before, with a letter from our attorney, a cease and desist, because we had legislation passed in Texas that said you couldn't isolate a patient. And so so my daughter, she called everyone I ever helped get elected in Texas. And we know who we'll work with and who we won't anymore, because it's the ones
Mm.
that helped us that we will. But Senator Bob Hall, who wrote the bill that said you can't isolate patients, he was working with my husband and an attorney to get that to the hospital and to put pressure on the hospital to let him in. So my husband comes down to the hospital and he called me, and they stopped him and he gave him the letter. They wouldn't honor it. And so he called me, and my voicemail picked up. So it recorded actually the entire conversation between me and him. And he said, "They won't let me up. They want to hear it from you that you want me up. Tell them that you want." I said, "I want you here with me." And he said, and they still said no. And so my husband called 911, and he said, "They're not letting me into my wife's room. Are you listening to me? They're breaking the law." They sent a police officer down. They sent 3 police officers down, and they wouldn't honor the law. They wouldn't enforce the law. And so my husband said, "Well, will you do a welfare check on my," and at this time I had bruises all over my body, and they threw a gown on me because the police were coming up, and the police officer said, your wife's fine. She's in a hospital." And he said, "I wouldn't have called you if she was fine. Go, I need you." And so finally one officer did. He put the garb on and he stood at the door, but he allowed an abusive nurse in the room with me while he questioned me. I had one shot. I said, he said, "Your husband wants me to do a welfare check. What do you want me to tell him?" And I said, I told the officer all of the abuse that was going on, just everything that was going on. And I told him, I said, "If I stay here, they're going to murder me. They're going to murder me." And he said, "Oh
What
my
did he
God."
say?
He said, "Oh my God, we don't have a protocol for that." And he left. I thought he went back and told my husband, but apparently he didn't. I found that out when my husband came in the next day. So the next morning, my husband called me. Somebody had seen how they were trying to save me, how they wanted to take me home, and brought him equipment, a concentrator and some oxygen and all of the things that he would need to turn our house into a MASH unit to save me. Because now the hospital has made me very sick, and the abuse and neglect in the hospital has made me very sick. And he called me and he said, he said, he said, I'm going to take you home hospice, but only I'm going to try to save your life. If I get in there, do you want to go? Because he didn't want to like charge, storm the ICU. And then I'm like, no, I don't want to go home. Right. And I said, no, I'm going to die here. Like if you get in, I don't know how you're going to get in, but if you get in here, I'm going home with you. And so he did, he, God made a way. When he got there with the letter, with the cease and desist and all of the documentation that the lawyer gave him, the security guard that always would stop him, the old security guard, he wasn't at his desk. There was some young guy that never seen my husband before. The older one was in the bathroom. And so my husband threw it down and said, I'm going to get my wife. And he was like, okay, sir. And then the elevator doors were open. And as the elevator doors were closing, the old security guard saw him and couldn't get to the elevator. So he had to take the stairs. So my husband was up the elevator while this guy was going up the stairs. And it was the only day I was there that the ICU doors were wide open. You didn't have to get badged in or anything. They were just wide open, standing open. And he went off the elevator, turned, and my room was right there. And by the time he was in my room and they were chasing him, he was already in there. And they were like, you need to get out. You need to get out. And they called the police, and there were 6 police officers showed up. My daughter was stuck in the hallway because she couldn't get through, but that was a godsend because she videotaped the police. We called the police, they called the police, and Senator Bob Hall called the police because we called him right away. She called him and she's like, my dad's in the room. And we don't know, we can't get out. And so,
is the hospital a prison? Since when can you not get out?
Since when can you not leave? Right. And so, that was the predicament we were in, because we thought the police would help us, our rights, and, we have a right to leave. And, that wasn't the case. So for 6 hours, we went back and forth, and they were trying to lure my husband out, just like, get out, come out and get this. And he would just hand off like the keys to get oxygen to my daughter, and my daughter would go get him. He was very smart in not going past that door. Right. And they sent in doctors to gaslight me. Oh, if you go home, you're going to die. They told my family many times, you just need to let her go. Her lungs were shot. She'll be on a ventilator her whole life. She'll need a lung transplant. These are my same lungs that I went in with and came back with. Clearly, they lied. And I saw people die there every day. And so I needed to get out. And I was willing to risk dying at home. Then, and finally these doctors came in and they were like, well, you'll be dead. He can't manage your oxygen. You're going to die if you go home. And I told him, I trust my husband. I asked him, I said, do you have everything you need to try to save me? He said, yeah, I do. And I said, I trust my husband. I would rather go home and have him try to save me than be murdered at your hands, because I would have been murdered by their hands. And eventually this sergeant came in from the Plano Police Department, and he was really just trying to talk my husband into standing down. And I asked him, I told him, I said, you're going to have to decide today if I'm a patient or a prisoner, because I want to go home with my husband. And I think something clicked in his head that, oh my gosh, yeah, like, we can't be doing this. Like we can't take part in this, holding this woman. Whether we think it's better for her to stay here or not is irrelevant. She's going to die. She's going to die. And so eventually they kept bringing in a against medical advice form. Okay. And we said we need a hospice form, because an against medical advice form lets them off the hook for what they did to me. And so my
Yeah.
husband just scratched everything out and rewrote it the way he knew as a nurse to rewrite it, into a home hospice form, so that they would not be off the hook for the things that they did. And if they didn't assist us in leaving, that was another violation of the whole going home hospice. And so he did that, and they went completely hands off. And the floor nurse, William Fripp, well, first, when my husband got in there, he was pretty mad because I was naked. I was covered in dirt, poop, everything. Like, he
Oh,
was
man.
so angry at what he saw. Bruises. I had, this size bruises all over my body. And he was so mad. And so when he turned, and there was no privacy curtain, everybody could see me laying in that bed. That's how they did us. That they treated us like animals. And I did think, oh, I'm just going to hop up, get in that wheelchair, and he's going to wheel me out, right? Well, it didn't work that easy. So he had a bottle of oxygen. He brought a little bottle of oxygen with him, and he had to switch me over. He had to get me dressed. He had to put clothes on me, and he was like, okay, we got to go. Like, we got to go. And I tried to stand up, and my legs didn't work at all. Like, so he had to like get me into the chair. He found a therapy chair somewhere in the hallway, brought it in. And then, instead of taking us out the way that he came in, they're like, oh, we have a shortcut. Well, it was longer. And they didn't want anybody seeing me leave in the condition I was in. And they wanted to send a message. So they had him wheel me all the way to the service elevator, where they took bodies down to the morgue. And we took that, and he had my daughter park where the funeral homes pick up the bodies. And so and then when we got to the truck, he told my husband, he said, mark my words, she'll be dead tonight. She'll probably be dead by the time you get her home. And my husband put me in the car, and he said, you better hope. He said, I'm going to do everything I can to save my wife. And I know my wife. If she lives, you better hope she dies, because if she lives, she's never going to let you forget about it. She's never going to stop coming after you guys. She's never going to stop talking about it. She's never going to stop fighting against it. She's never going to stop. So you better hope she does die.
So you come home, and so at this point, are you able to take the budesonide that Dr. Bartlett had prescribed? Was your husband able to get a hold of that medication?
Oh, yes. So Dr. Bartlett had us go to a specific pharmacy to get budesonide, ivermectin, vitamins. He even connected us with somebody to do an IV vitamin treatment right away. I mean, because the first 72 hours were horrific. Like, I did almost die the first night, because he had my husband could get me to 25 liters of oxygen. That was all he could do. I was on 60 when I left, and my body was so, had to adjust to that quick titration. And so it was like no sleep for them and Dr. Bartlett was awesome. Like, he called us every night, like, okay, how is she? This and that, and he told me, on the third day, he was like, you got to get up and walk every day. You got to get up, you got to do things, because you're fighting for your life. And so that first week was very critical. That was December 15th that he stormed the ICU to get. I always say he stormed the ICU and slayed dragons in real life for his wife. So that was, and he'll be like, he said, I'd do it all over again. God told him to do it, and he did it. My husband was ultimately prosecuted for that. About a year later, they indicted him, and he got a misdemeanor that because
Well,
he
the security guard let him go up. So what do you mean? What would he have been in
because
trouble for?
he didn't like obey the police when they told him to leave, and he's like, yeah, I'd do it all over again too. He's like, I would do it if I would have left, I would have. And so, so there was a lot of, it was very difficult to, you know, to fight that in a world that doesn't understand what happened in the hospitals,
That's
right?
right.
So,
That's right.
juries are very um, unpredictable. They think people died of COVID when they were really being killed by the protocols, and so
And
it
so I want to stop for a second here, Gail, because I want to explain that to people. So Dr. Brian Artis was really who I was listening to in the very, very, very
yes,
beginning. And he happened to have a story of how he found out that had to do with his father-in-law the
yeah,
year before. And so he knew that remdesivir, he just happened to know that remdesivir, it was the protocol that doctors, hospitals were requiring, I mean, forcing doctors to do. In
yes,
fact, to the point that if the doctors tried to do ivermectin or anything like that, they were threatening to fire the doctors. So the
that's right,
hospitals were requiring that you follow this specific protocol, and it was to give the patient remdesivir and put them on a ventilator, which really was making people drown in their own fluids
yeah,
until it killed them. And I absolutely believe 100% they knew. That's why it was the protocol. And
yeah,
so, because how many times, that's just like what you said, even, which furthers this whole theory. We have proof after proof after proof, though. But in your situation where the medication was working, so they changed it because it
yeah.
was working.
They
And so
changed it.
nobody in their right mind would do that if they were genuinely trying to help you. I mean, the guy comes in and declares, really, you're going to die. And he's just letting you know, that you're dying. And he let you
Yeah,
know his intentions. But so I want people to understand that, just in case you didn't know, that is the case. Now, one thing I was wondering, we had a viewer ask, Cousidoo77 was asking, why weren't you on an IV drip? And I mean, that goes back to,
yeah,
they weren't going to give you anything. They
that's
were
right.
systematically trying to murder you, really.
Yeah, so I had an IV and it was turned off. And I will say this: one of the nurses on day 4 got really upset, and she was like, "This needs to stay on all the time." But the way I got water on day 7 was they were bringing me water with laxatives in it, and I said, "I can't drink that. I'll dehydrate and die. Like that will kill me." And I said, "If I can have water with laxatives in it, why can't I have water with just water in it? Like it doesn't make sense, right?" And they were like, "Well, you can't have water." I'm like, "Well, why can I have water with laxatives in it?" And this patient care tech, she she accident I accidentally, the water tip dumped, and she said, she came in, it was her first day on the job, and she said, "Oh, Miss Gail, your water." She's like, "Would you like me to get you some fresh water?" I said, "Would you? And some ice chips too? That would be amazing." And she did, and the nurse saw me drinking, and she's like, "You're nothing by mouth." What I said, "I don't know who told you that, because here I am drinking water." Like, and she goes, "Oh, I'm gonna go get you some Ensure." And then the doctor stopped her, and she said, "He said you can't have the Ensure, but you can have ice chips going forward." Well, I'm an educated woman, so I know how to turn ice into water, right? Like, I mean, you just let it melt. And so that's how I got the water. And I will never take water for granted again since that time.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
like there's a lot of things I won't take for granted again. But you were talking about Dr. Artis, and
Mhm.
listening to him was why I remembered the drugs I didn't want, like not just remdesivir, but like Actemra and baricitinib and all of those drugs. He has these catchy names for them, right? So you remember them. And every
Mhm.
time they would bring a drug up, I'd be like, "No, I don't want that," because I would remember it from how many times he talked about it. So it makes a difference. And we have on our website, betrayalprojectusa.org, based on all of the stories that we've heard, because I started speaking out right away I went on His Glory TV. They helped my daughter, so like that was the first interview I did. I was still on oxygen when I did that interview, and I would hear from hundreds of people who were like, "This happened to me. This happened to my loved one. This happened," and so based on like years worth of listening to stories and looking at medical records and documenting stories, we put together what's called the Hospital Deadly Playbook. And the number one thing on there, and it starts with before you get to the hospital, it starts with your family doctor, the doctor who refused to treat you with the protocol that would have saved you, that would have prevented you from going to the hospital. Because at that moment, people who doctors who people saw for 25 years or treated their family for forever, that doctor turned their lifelong patient into a victim with that one simple act. And that was not giving them something as simple as budesonide. If they had only even just given the budesonide, that alone, it has antiviral properties. It's a inhaled steroid. Without the budesonide, every 2 hours, my husband would have never been able to titrate me down the way that he did, and without Dr. Bartlett's help. And so that mattered, very much mattered. In fact, if Laura's form, I do not consent form.com, had existed back then, if I had that back then, there were a lot of things that I believe would have been different in terms of, I think they would have been afraid to do some of the things that they did, right? Especially with as active as my family
Sure.
was,
Locally, with
advocating for me.
politics and everything. So Sharice Rose says, I honestly hate listening to this because our family went through this, and my mother-in-law and her brother died in an Ohio hospital from intubation, and run death is near remdesivir, 2 days apart. Ferguson says, that is what happened to my dad. He had a rash on his legs. They admitted the next thing. 3 days later, he was incubated on IV fentanyl. There was no reason that they had to do that. The rash was all. They absolutely killed him. I think that it's going to be shocking if we had a place where every single testimony, where we could see how many people have loved ones that were murdered during this time frame. It's absolutely horrific. And it's a miracle. You're a walking miracle.
We have a thing called the Medical Crime Victims Wall on our website.
Yeah.
Add your loved ones to that wall, because that's what we're trying to show. We're trying to show the different states, I think there's about 300 people on there right now. And so if you do something as simple as adding them to their picture to that wall, it has been very effective when people look at it and they're like, oh my gosh, that many people.
All right. So I want to talk about what you're doing now. So Betrayal Project USA.org. And that's what Ferguson, Sharice Rose, please go to that website. Please share the stories and make sure that people know. Also, there is a new development that we want to share for everybody. And that is that Senator Ron, the whole information that you were sharing about Senator Ron Johnson. So after your time here with me today, if you'll please email me the link to where you wrote all the details, so that everybody that has a story, a testimony of what happened to them, if they want to write in and submit their story as potentially one of the 200 testimonies, they'll have all the information and they can read what you wrote about all the details. So tell a little bit about what Senator Ron Johnson's doing.
Okay. So two of the protocol widows, Leslie Batts and Peggy Hokett, they have been very staunch fighters for justice in these. Their husbands were killed by the protocols in Oklahoma. They did get a hold of Ron Johnson, and he's agreed if they can pull everything together to do a committee hearing like he's doing for the COVID shots for the protocols. He recognizes that we are telling the truth about what happened in the hospitals, and that they kind of turned the hospitals into killing fields. And so their mission is to get as many one-page story in a page. There's very specific rules around it, which I did a Substack article on, and I'll send that to you. Leslie Batts is collecting those, and they need to go through her with the very specific details, the way that you have to tell it, the what it can and cannot include is all in that Substack. And so he needs 200 to hold a hearing. We should be able to give him thousands. We should,
That's right.
because there's thousands out there that are willing and able to tell their story. So there's that part of writing that letter for them.
Okay. And
We
with
have
that, we're going to put that, I'm going to have producer Ron put it on the Michelle Moore Show's Rumble channel for today's show. It'll be in the show description. So that way you'll have the link to Gail's Substack for those of you that want to submit your story, your testimony of what happened. And let's see if we can get 1,000 or more or thousands.
I'd love to.
And so those, I know we have a lot of viewers that have these testimonies. You just got to write them in. Don't worry. Look at Gail's Substack and get all the details on making sure that you do that. And then also Gail's website, Betrayal Project USA, is another place to share your story there as well. Tell us a little bit about resources, because I know that there are many people that are watching or they're going to see today's show and they need a support group. They have PTSD. There are many different things. Share what you're doing, Gail.
Yeah, so we also have support groups. There's on our website, you can sign up for our support groups. We have a men's support group. We have multiple support groups. We have faith-based support groups. We have a really great Monday night support group that is led by Dr. Patty Giuliano, who is a survivor and a whistleblower herself. And her specialty is PTSD and trauma. And so she does a PTSD trauma workshop and a support group on Monday night. It's for 2 hours, and you can connect with other people that have been through this. And
Everything's free?
Are healing. Everything's free. Oh, of course, everything's free. Absolutely. We're a nonprofit, and so telling your story in and of itself is a really good way to honor your loved one and get the message out. It does take some moral courage to tell it publicly. We recognize that, so we try to make it very easy to do. We also have a private Facebook group. It's private because people need to be able to say what they want to say in that group without having trolls or people really attack them. We do a spaces every Sunday night where people can come on and talk about their experience with regard to medical crimes in general, but we really do focus a lot on the protocols. And it's important to note, betrayalprojectusa.org is a victim-run organization. It is a nonprofit, so we hope people will support us as well. But we are a victim-run support group. Everybody on the board is a victim of medical crimes, of protocols specifically. And so they've either had somebody murdered by the protocols or are a survivor.
Well, Gail, I sure appreciate you coming in today. And thank you so much also to Laura Bartlett for introducing us. We're going to talk with Laura. I want to say thank you so much for not only coming and sharing your story, but actually working to make a difference, not just speaking up and speaking out, but to help those with PTSD and to have this, what you've done. Your husband was right when he would talk to the doctor at the car and was like, you better hope she dies. And so tell your husband, good for him, because most people wouldn't have even said that. And so, and I'm telling you, we all know, everybody watching knows you're a walking miracle. And, but you know what? But I will say this, you're not alive for no good reason. And you're proving it, and you're walking out the purpose and the calling on your life because God knew. And so just praise God for you, Gail, and you keep doing the good work that God has for you to do, sweetheart. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. All right. So like I said, thank you. A special thank you to Laura Bartlett. Let's go on ahead and bring her in. Her brother is Dr. Richard Bartlett, who he himself is a complete hero. As Gail even shared, he helped save Gail's life. And so, Laura, I know you got to be really proud of your brother, but you yourself, I have to say, I don't call people heroes, by the way. I don't go around saying that very often, but what you're doing and what you've been doing is just absolutely heroic in your own right as well. And so, I'm a big fan of yours. And so, Laura, thank you for introducing us to Gail so that people can hear what the hospital was really like, what they were doing. This is complete insanity to hear she didn't even have a blanket on. It's just insanity. But Laura, so I have so many questions for you. So the first thing I want to say is,
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, you're frozen. Uh-oh. Michelle? I don't know what happened.
okay, so we're going to try this again. Oh my word. Let's see, is Laura here? Laura's not here. So here she comes. So we're going to bring her back in. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Hi, Laura, honey. Are you there?
Hi. Well, that was weird.
Yes, very weird.
Technical
Okay, so
problems.
well, okay, so let's I have so many questions for you. So the first thing is wow, there's so much that's been going on over, since the whole slowing of the spread, shutting the country down, all of that kind of stuff. And so Laura, we know what that was all like back then. What is it like now? What are you seeing now versus then? Is it better? Is it the same? Has it gone completely away? Like what's going on?
Well, people, first of all, silver lining, people are aware that hospitals are not some place that you just passively go through and expect to sail through the process with your best interest top of mind of the doctors and nurses and the for-profit organization called a hospital. So there's that. The awareness is there. What I'm seeing now with COVID obviously isn't at the epic numbers of people going to the hospital for that. But what people are going to the hospital for is for emergent care they're avoiding hospitals if they can, but there are times when you got to have you have a broken leg and you might need a pin put in with surgery, or you might need your knees worked on, your back worked on. Like the woman that I helped in Michigan that needed back surgery and was so scared spitless to have it done that she almost canceled 24 hours before her surgery, reached out to me, got her the I do not consent form so that she could be assured that they wouldn't do something sneaky like give her a vaccine or a drug that she does not want, or do another procedure that she does not want. She preemptively gave the hospital very clear boundaries. And so that's what people are doing now, is they are operating in the assumption that they can refuse things. Isn't it kind of sneaky that we have trained people to believe that if they just had enough information with the word informed, in front of consent, that if you're just informed of everything, then your part as the patient is to just consent. It's almost a brainwashing. And my efforts now are to undo all that brainwashing and let people know that you can refuse. It should be informed refusals, right? Because we all know about vaccines. So what I'm doing with the informed consent form with Dr. Margaret Aranda's help is to give people a tool so that when they walk into a hospital, whether it's a broken leg or appendicitis or whatever, that they have their refusals documented, the hospital's noticed, and it slides in with that general consent form so that there's literally nothing they can do to undermine your wishes from the get-go. Before a bracelet gets put on your hand, before they put you in a room in a gown, your refusals are protected, and they can't violate it without consequences.
Okay, so Laura, one thing I wonder though is, will the medical staff honor your wishes even when you have the I do not consent form?
It hasn't been violated yet. And it's because you preemptively slide it in with that general consent. So anything that this is the I do not consent form, this is your general consent form. When they go in at the same time, at the moment you're admitted, whatever is in your I do not consent form overrides the general consent that's in violation. Say they snuck some sneaky language in there that you didn't recognize in the general consent. Say that they called it a biologic to get a vaccine administered.
Wordsmithing.
Well, you're wordsmithing, right. But if you have your I do not consent form, it overrides the general consent things that are in violation to your wishes to refuse something. So far so good. Whether they want to, they feel obligated to prevent the downstream consequence legally of a lawsuit, because you can sue for intentional medical battery if they violate the I do not consent form. So to answer your question, they may not want to, but they know they have to.
Okay, so Laura, there's been times that you have shared. Laura, there were times where you've had people that have reached out to you urgently needing your help. And so has that still been going on, or are you finding now that people are showing up and because of the awareness, they're prepared, or are the hospitals trying to pull some funny business still, and you're finding that there's still emergent situations where you're having to get on the phone and talk with doctors on speakerphone? Is that still happening?
I'm finding that it's a demographic that they target. The most vulnerable are the older senior population, and it's the children of their senior parents that reach out to me because they may not be aware. They're still they're so trusting of the hospital, the hospital medical industrial complex, if you will. They go into the hospital. Now it's the children, the adult children that I'm dealing with that are saying, I need my mom and dad protected. And so it seems to be that population that's still most at risk. And they're looked at, I believe, as expendables in the hospitals. So I can't urge your viewers enough to get your mom, your dad, your grandparents, yourself, obviously, protected with this paperwork that will tell the hospital in no, there's no ambiguity. This is absolutely not what I want, and you can't do it. But yes, it's the older population that I'm seeing that I'm getting most of the calls for now, because it seems like the population that's like 60 and younger, they've had the light switch go off in their head, and they're like, I don't want to be at a hospital if I can help it. And if I have to be in a hospital, I want to have that paperwork in hand. So the good news, the silver lining, is that people are becoming more aware that they need to be proactive, and they need to do their paperwork with a advanced directive for when they're incapacitated, so that DNR thing doesn't happen, like what they were trying to do with, which is a do not resuscitate with Gail Seiler, and what happened to Scott Shara. You need an advanced directive for that. You need your I do not consent form for the moment you walk into a hospital and still can walk and talk and say, I don't want something. You want the paperwork to talk for you.
Wow. All right. So I'm sure there's some people that are like, wow, this is a lot for me to take in. I didn't know. We have a story that I want to share. And so 28-year-old number one producer, Ron, if you would please put that on the screen for me. I want to read this, Laura. So this was a post that I saw recently, and so from a Kelly, who is a functional integrative medicine account that's on X, and it says August the 27th, 2021, a healthy 28-year-old girl with special needs arrived at Northwell Hospital in Glen Cove, North Long Island. So other than a persistent mild cough, Danielle Alvarez was perfectly fine, labs showed. The staff should have sent her home. Get this one. She's a special needs child. So instead, Danielle suffered 40 days of medical experimentation, neglect, and physical, emotional, and psychological torture before her body succumbed on October the 6th, 2021. Her mom, Rebecca Charles Jackson, didn't know hospitals had become killing centers financially incentivized to administer deadly protocols in the name of COVID. Now, again, this is in 2021, so we kind of got to go back to that time frame. She thought that her daughter was going to be cared for by medical professionals, not milked like a cash cow to the tune of $650,000 that was billed to private insurance and an additional unknown amount billed to Medicare. Rebecca didn't know the hospital would assign Danielle an organ donor identification number without her consent. They made her an organ donor without her or her mother's consent. Remember, the girl, even though she was special needs, she was 28 years old and she was healthy except for a persistent mild cough. She didn't realize that the staff would administer 10 doses of remdesivir, twice the standard COVID protocol of the emergency use authorized drug. Rebecca never imagined the staff would pump Danielle with fentanyl, let alone lethal levels measuring 53 milliliters at the time of, I think that's going to say her death. That's almost quintuple the amount, which is 11 milliliters that was found in George Floyd's body. Nor did Rebecca know that Danielle would be subjected to propofol for over 23 days, exceeding safe limits and without any monitoring for propofol-related infusion syndrome. She could not have guessed at the panoply of the other drugs that Danielle would be administered. And goes on to say, most without Rebecca's knowledge or consent, including, and they've got a whole list of stuff, including morphine and chemical restraints. Goes on to say, Rebecca did not anticipate the doctor known among staff as the ventilator maestro, who later confessed to Rebecca, I have nightmares about your daughter, would intubate Danielle unnecessarily for 32 days. Danielle was murdered by hospital protocol. We will never forget until justice is served for these victims and their families. And then this is a picture of the mama and the daughter. So, yeah. Laura, I mean, you are dealing with.
I'm familiar. We actually interviewed we meaning Dr. Margaret Aranda and I interviewed on a next space Rebecca Charles and her two attorneys who are taking this. The brave attorneys, Trisha and Graham, are two heroes of mine. They are brave enough to take this case and try to take it forward all the way. I hope they get it over the finish line because I think they have a great case. Wished that this document had been available sooner because the hospitals knew there was no protection in the history of hospitals that would protect patients. No, from the moment they walk in with capacity, meaning I can talk and give you my decision verbally, up until the point where they're on a ventilator. So you can imagine COVID being a big old problem for most people because they said no. They questioned things. You heard Gail Seiler say no to a lot of things. A lot of people said no and they still got things. And that's why the I do not consent form is so critical because there's a whole lot they can put in your body within minutes that you're admitted. So I'm very familiar with the case, and I hope that Rebecca Charles sees justice for Danielle. It is, it's criminal. I'll just say it. They murdered her.
Sure.
And so
and they would have done it to Gail too if they would have had the chance. And they almost
Absolutely.
was successful. So I was reading about, and this is very interesting, and I wanted to talk with you about this and see what your thoughts were. I think Gail's story is an example of this. So we have another story that I came across, or another post. So this is about obedience. So obedience number one, producer Ron, please. I want to read this to the listeners and to you, Laura. It talks about, so this is from an account named Kenny Carmody, and he says, every obedience experiment in history had the same overlooked finding: not everyone complied. In Milgram's lab, 35% refused to deliver the final shock. In Line experiments, 25% never conformed, not once, across any trial. In Zimbardo's prison, at least one guard refused to dehumanize. One prisoner demanded a lawyer instead of a doctor and broke the psychological frame entirely. We spent decades studying the ones who obeyed. We barely ask what made the others different. That question matters more than it ever has. The resistors in the COVID era were not difficult to find. Physicians who filed exemptions and lost their licenses. Nurses who walked away from careers rather than mandate patients into decisions they hadn't genuinely chosen. Scientists who published contrary data, knowing what it would cost them. Parents who stood alone at school board meetings. Ordinary people who simply said, quietly, without drama, no. The next one. What made them different? Research consistently identifies a cluster of factors, not personality traits that you have, you either have or don't, situational and cognitive patterns that can be cultivated. First, prior reflection on authority. The resistors had usually thought before the crisis about the limitations of institutional trust. They weren't cynics. They were people who had already asked the question, under what conditions would I refuse, before anyone was asking them to comply. Second, a concrete reference point outside the consensus, a value, a principle, an oath, a relationship that existed independently of the institutional structure, demanding compliance, something the system couldn't reach. Maybe, for example, for Dr. Richard Bartlett, is it that he's saying, I took an oath not to harm someone. I don't know what his is and was at the time, and maybe you do or don't, but that's an example. For me, mine was, I knew my God-given rights, and I knew what the Holy Spirit was showing me throughout that process. And that is something that the system couldn't reach for me personally. Third, at least one other person. Milgram found that a single dissenting Confederate reduced compliance dramatically. The resistors rarely stood entirely alone. They found each other. They sustained each other, gave each other permission. There is strength in numbers. Fourth, the willingness to tolerate social pain, not immunity to it, tolerance of it. They felt the pressure. They felt the exclusion. They chose the discomfort of integrity Now we're talking, Laura. Integrity. That was me. I was not going to lie. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to lie. I was going to stand in what truth was. And so they felt the pressure. I certainly felt the pressure at the grocery store. I was the only one that wasn't masked. Of course, I felt the pressure. But I wasn't going to do it, because if I put a mask on, it was like living a lie. And I just wasn't going to do that. I wasn't willing to lie. They felt the exclusion. They chose the discomfort of integrity over the comfort of belonging. None of this is innate. All of it is learnable. The most important thing that Milgram, Osh, and Zimbardo taught us is not only taught us is not how fragile conscious is. It's that conscious can hold if you've trained it, named its limits, and found even one other person willing to hold theirs beside you. For me, it was producer Ron, by the way, and my children. We had our own cocoon, and my mother in love, and we knew the truth. We were digging, and I was finding the truth, and then I was sharing it and reporting it. Build that now, because that experiment, or the experiment, is always running until they stay humble. So, Laura, what are you finding when you see these people that are calling you and they're in the hospital, they're looking at these doctors and they're up against the odds? What are you seeing? Are you seeing, that what is it? How is it that they're the ones that can pick up the phone and call you and stand up?
That's a good question, because there is a pattern that I've noticed, like a fact pattern in the last 6 years. When people call me, whether it's in the middle of the night or whenever, they're the same type of people. They do seem to have a connection with God. My brother and I, my family is very in tune with God, and we serve him first. And we've had these little tests, in life. I know my brother's had tests, a lot of tests. I've had tests as a single mom, things that I did not compromise on. In business, with the product that I brought to market before this whole thing, and I sacrificed all of it to do this, stopped my life to just be an advocate, was a test, and it prepared me. And I think that there's that type of fortitude, that integrity, that it seems like the people who call have that same kind of thing. Their whole family's against them. They may be the one person in their family that says, I think I know what's up, and I'm willing to be different, not ostracized by trying to save mom or dad or my uncle, my aunt. There's that same sort of, I'm willing to go up against the forces of evil for truth. And
wow.
And they all have a connection with God, it seems like. I haven't met an atheist that's called me, or an agnostic. They all seem to be some individual with a connection with God. My brother getting the budesonide idea was an answer to prayer. He was in a call room at the ER, took a nap. He was going to take a nap for a little bit, and he asked God, I need an answer to this COVID thing, back in, early, like the first few months of 2020. Woke up, and God gave him this download, that budesonide, and he started trying it, and it worked. And together we were a brother-sister duo getting the word out around the world.
That's amazing.
So it's
all
not,
right, so
I can't answer it any other way.
So great. That's a great answer, though. All right. So we've got a viewer over on YouTube that says, how do we contact Laura Bartlett? So the first thing is, we want to tell you, go to idonotconsentform.com to get the form and to fill it out, and all the instructions is on there, Laura.
It is, and they've been updated just in the last couple of days. Dr. Margaret Aranda and together we redid the instructions. They're easy to read. Some of the common questions I kept getting are answered now. But if you need to reach me, I am reachable through the hospital hostage hotline, which is 888-219-3637. Leave me a text, leave me a voicemail. If I can't answer the phone, I'm talking to somebody else, and I will call you back. And I will walk you through anything that you're not sure of. I want you to do it right.
Laura. That's amazing. Laura,
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, sweetheart. It's just like I said, I think everybody that's watching can see why I referred to you as a hero. That does not come easy. And Dr. Margaret's another one. But Laura, thank you so much for making the connection with Gail so that we could share her story and share the efforts that she's got. And this is just, I think the thing that's so amazing is that years later, here we are, we still have no accountability. I don't know of anybody that's sitting in prison for what they did during this time frame. But I do know that there are a lot of people that have woken up that are still honoring their loved ones who were murdered, and who are speaking up that if they were able to live and able to make it through it, they're speaking up and they're fighting back like Gail has done. And you are just doing an amazing job. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you so much for helping to educate.
Thank you, Michelle. It really does take brave people to amplify my voice. Dr. Margaret and I have had crazy censorship. So thank you so much. We just want people to be prepared, not scared.
Oh, I love it. That's so good. All right. Thank you, Laura. Just great work she's doing, and her doctor. God bless both of them. I bet their parents are really proud of them. Could you imagine? Okay, so AJF 111 says the poor women with a medicine cabinet. This poor woman with women with a medicine cabinet and a guinea pig for doctor. Yeah. Pursue him too. Amen, Michelle. Stand tall and fight back. The evil is hovering and ready to jump. Okay, so let's see. How use the term because shots. Okay, I was just looking at some of these comments over on YouTube real quick to make sure that we answered everything that we could. Can you take these forms with you, or do you have to go to the hospital prior? You take them with you when you sign the forms and everything when you're, let's say you're having a surgery or whatever, and you're going to be signing consent forms. She was explaining you take the forms and you turn them in at the same time. I can't understand for the life of me how these doctors thought that it was okay to kill. Sharice Rose says, I think, now this is just me, but I suspect that some of these people were placed, and they've been placed. I think we have, I hate to say it like this, but almost like sleepers, and that are throughout, really probably, we know it's in the political system. I'm sure it's in the banking system and everything else, that we probably haven't, could imagine from that to teachers. I mean, look at Hope Errol Green even talks about that the people that were her handlers that imprisoned her, they were, the one was a teacher. He was a gym teacher at the school in town, and then because they placed them strategically around schools to make sure that when you go to school, you don't tell what's going on. But then also they had the lady who was like the secretary of the church in on what was going on, and would give them access to be able to come in and do witchcraft and all kinds of stuff in the church at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. So of the church they were trying to take down at the time. So, I mean, they're all over the place. And so to think that the doctors and nurses aren't involved, I think that would be naive. And think about some of the stories that we've heard. This is what I was going to talk about earlier when we were having technical difficulties, is I've heard of stories from nurses saying that they were threatened and told to shut their mouths, even though they're freaking out because they're seeing other nurses and doctors that are really killing the patients and not providing the right medical care. And they're, being put in a corner and being like bullied, telling them to shut their mouths and keep them shut if you want to, keep your job. And so this is the kind of stuff that was going on in hospitals. You think it only happened then? I find it hard to believe. I just find it hard to believe that it only happened then and it's no longer happening now. And so, but the best way to be able to fight back, I love that Laura said, hey, look, you got the form. We're not having people breach it. You're putting it in writing. Do they need to be notarized? I'm pretty sure it does need to be notarized, GK. So yes. And so, of course, you can get a notary at a bank. Usually it's easy to find a notary overall. It's typically pretty easy. All right. Well, I hope that you have found today's show helpful, I want to remind you about the 2 documentaries that we've got. Tomorrow's going to be fantastic. In the Shadow of Flexner talks about the Flexner report, what they've done to our medical system. If you don't know, it's going to be eye-opening. And they've tried to, demonize and make it out like it's quackery to use, holistic. It's God's medicine. It's God's plants. And I say it's God's order. Steve Jarvis is always talking about when you have a problem, it's usually something out of order. Well, I think tinctures, like, for example, that we just released on godlygranny.com, those tinctures, that's God's medicine. And so it's God's stuff. And so, but they tried to make it out like quackery. It's our great-great-grandmothers, different things that they used. They used tinctures back then. That's why it's called Godly Granny, by the way. It was, if you haven't read the story, our story on godlygranny.com, go to the story page and you'll read how I came up with the name of Godly Granny, because there were 2 parts to that. And one of them was to honor our ancestors, our great grannies, great grandma, who used these kinds of things, who had a salve. And so who didn't run to the pharmaceutical industry, who didn't run to a doctor. They knew to get out whatever butter and this and that and how to make this and how to make that. And so that's what we're working hard to get back to those things. And then also, she's a godly granny. It's God's ingredients, but it's also in alignment with him and his word. And so, and then Thursday, the 5G Trojan horse is going to be good too. We covered all of this at the very beginning of today's show. Just want to remind you, those are the 2 documentaries that we're going to be airing tomorrow and Thursday in obedience to what God directed us to do, which was to make sure that we were sharing documentaries and educational videos on the Michelle Moore Show. So we do that. All right. We hope that you enjoyed today's show. I'll be back live on Friday. I can't wait. I'm going to miss you guys for 2 days, but I'll see you on Friday. All right. We'll see you right here next time on the Michelle Moore Show.
Ever read the ingredients on your everyday products and think, wait, is this shampoo or a science experiment? If your lotion needs a translator, a lab coat, and a warning label, it might be time for a change. Godly Granny products are made with purpose, love, and ingredients you can actually recognize. No mystery chemicals, no toxins, just clean, simple goodness. The way Granny would have wanted. Because your skincare shouldn't require a chemistry degree. From shampoo, lotion, skincare, and all natural health remedies, Godly Granny has everything your family needs. It's no wonder we have over 1,200 5-star reviews from our amazing customers to prove it. Join the families just like yours who've switched to Godly Granny. Visit godlygranny.com and sign up for our emails to receive a special discount code for 10% off your first order, plus exclusive updates and information on newly released products.
Hi, I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the inventor of the Wave Watch, the world's first frequency therapy watch. It features over 1,100 targeted frequencies combined into 150 playlists for ease of use. These sounds are acoustical and they move through your body, through your skin and your bones. You don't necessarily have to hear it. As each frequency goes through, it can be realigning, revitalizing, reconnecting, and even rebalancing your body all the way to the cellular level. So that's why we have so many testimonies for aches, ADD and ADHD, allergies, colds and flu, dental, emotions, headaches, joints, kidney stones, nerves, organs, skin health, swelling, tremors, vagus nerve, and so many more. Use this code for $100 off when you purchase the Wave Watch. Thanks for learning about frequencies, using them, and supporting the Wave Watch.
Hi friends, it's Michelle Moore. And when it comes to protecting your retirement, I believe in taking smart, steady steps. Bank of America analysts call gold the ultimate safe haven. And when it comes to precious metals, I trust Universal Coin and Bullion, the official rare coin and bullion dealer of my show. They have been named the best in their industry, both nationally and regionally, by leading organizations. Consider a gold IRA, a time-tested way to diversify your portfolio with real tangible assets, which lets you move a portion of your retirement savings into physical gold, helping protect your wealth from inflation, market swings, and economic uncertainty. And Universal Coin and Bullion makes the process easy. From rollovers to delivery, they walk you through every step, even if you have one with another gold company. Protect what you've worked so hard to build from the team that I trust, Universal Coin and Bullion, at 800-321-8700, and make sure to tell them Michelle sent you.
For Michelle's social media links, go to michellemooreshow.com.